So Tina was telling that we shouldn't kind of jump to the solution too quickly. I think one of the beauty of the approach is that in the beginning I was telling that why we need to actually to make a more systemic change happen, why we need to sometimes collaborate with downstream or upstream stakeholders or collaborators. So a solution, when you kind of open up to understand the problem, spend enough time on the problem, and open up to solutions which involve not only you, but rather your suppliers or buyers or material extractors or recyclers. You kind of, that's where you open for more systemic change to happen by co-design and collaboration with collaborators. So that's, I think, one of the beauty, the parts where it's unique in its approach. So to open up for questions, I think Tina has some questions that she usually gets asked to it, but I want to check whether if any of you have questions.
There's a couple of really good questions there. One of them I'll start with. The other one I think I can answer, but I might need to get some clarification. The external probity in your procurement question, procurement for innovation absolutely has to follow the public sector procurement rules that we follow in the public sector. And so we don't overstep any boundaries in terms of how we run the process and what we need to adhere to in terms of procurement rules. And that's not all that hard, actually, when you think that the methodology came from the UK. It's been used throughout Europe and North America. And so the way in which the process runs is very mindful of keeping within public sector procurement rules. And to make sure that that was the case for us, we have had a working group around each of our procurement for innovation exercises, which has included the specifiers or procurement practitioners of a particular department, for example, engineering. It's included economic development, and it's also included the procurement team. So we've had a procurement team member within our working group each time to make sure that we were keeping within the public sector rules that we're required to keep within all along the way. So I think that's helped to answer that probity question. There's a question about when an outcome requires a replicable solution, how leadership feel about potential benefits for other parties and or non-disclosure agreements, I think is what the NDAs is referring to. I hope so. If I've got that acronym wrong and it means something else to you, please let me know. There's many acronyms that mean many things, so correct me if I've assumed the wrong thing there. Look, I think, let me answer that in a couple of different ways. And if I've got it wrong, Alan, can you please let me know? So the replicability bit of the story is about encouraging suppliers to participate. We don't want to go to market for a one-off iconic response, because one-off and iconic suggests that you'd only ever do it once. And for public sector procurement, we know that we procure stuff all the time, and if there's a solution for a problem that we are having, it's likely there's going to be that solution, it's likely that solution is going to be relevant for somebody else in the public sector. And so we're looking for replicable solutions because we know that's enticing to suppliers, because effectively at the end of the day, only one supplier can win the tender. But if the other suppliers, so for example, with our Bridges project, we had tens of organisations download our procurement EOI information, our documentation. 13 of them showed up for the expression of interest process, 8 of them showed up for the tender process. And there was a winning consortium, which include one of our guests today, who ran a consortium that included themselves as a major engineering company in Ostend, Rockler, Deakin University and co, who brought together their innovation to be able to bring it to us through a tender process. It was local, it was more innovative than the rest of the responses, and we couldn't have been more delighted that we were going to give it to a local consortium, because we didn't expect that's what we were going to get. So the replicability meant that anybody else in the public sector, we kept telling the market, we're quite small fry in terms of recreational bridges in public spaces. We only really have 160 bridges in our recreational spaces, but our commitment is that we would continue to procure these bridges to replace those 160 over time. And if you compare us to a Yarra Ranges has heaps more public open space, for example. Yarra Ranges, who are another council in Victoria, because I know I spotted there was some attendees on this workshop who aren't from Victoria, but Yarra Ranges is another Victorian council. They have heaps more external public space than we do. And so we were trying to indicate to the market that if they could nail this solution for us, there are likely going to be other buyers on the market. So in terms of non-disclosure agreements, it's a really good point. Non-disclosure agreements pop up within the suppliers, and because the economic development team drives a lot of all of the market engagement work, and we are in the public sector, our code of conduct means that we are covered in terms of if a supplier thinks that we have overstepped boundaries in terms of confidentiality, they can actually refer to our code of conduct, and there's recourse there that they can, if they've asked for something to be kept confidential, then and we haven't, then there's recourse. So we didn't need to sign NDAs, but indeed one of the co-partners that we had delivering our procurement for innovation work at the time, who was a staff member from an external industry association called the Geelong Manufacturing Council, they indeed did need to sign an NDA because they're involved in these market engagement conversations, and that was the best way to protect, both sides of the conversation with their involvement. So NDAs is what I'm saying. NDAs can be involved. For us as a public sector entity, we just relied on our code of conduct to be the equivalent of that we would keep things confidential as we were asked to keep them confidential. Thank you. I think it was Joe who was interested in the training. Absolutely. Other questions
from Nicole?
Yep.
Yeah, there's a question from Nicole asking, because you mentioned that the market engagement process could take, identify the need process could take about a year. In a traditional process, what else is there to basically, I think, let the business case emerge? What else can be done in that phase? Do you want to answer that, or shall I go for it?
Yeah, sure, go ahead. I can read through. Hi, Nicole. I can read through and see if there's anything I can add after you've finished. So go ahead.
Thank you. Nicole, did I understand you correctly? What you're asking is in the traditional procurement process to go through that initial needs identification, having that business case developed. So considering the time that it takes, what else can be done? Am I correct?
No. I was asking if if as part of the identifying the need is developing the business case, which might include seeing what else is out there in the market in developing that business case. If in a traditional procurement process, would government or local council ordinarily do that market scan anyway to see what would need to go into the tender? Or would it be part of the tender for the winning organisation to do that market scan as part of the tender? So I'm just wondering if there's if it's called something different, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think I get what you're asking there, Nicole. The market scan is really to identify if there's already a solution on the market.
Yeah.
Because if there is, that's a straightforward procurement exercise. There's already solutions out there. There's, enough suppliers that we can just go straight to procurement. We do the market scan to identify if there isn't a solution on the market. Yeah. And we only proceed with a procurement for innovation if there isn't a solution on the market at the moment, because that's the wonderful stuff that you get to do in the market engagement phase, which is work with the market to help them develop their innovations. So for us at the city, what that looked like was providing business support to connect them to local research and development facilities that we have in our local university. For example, at Deakin University, we've got 2 campuses here, or consultants that can help them to do materials testing. Some of them needed to do some background R&D research. Others needed connections to bits of the supply chain that would enable them to give us a more complete solution. And so those connections to supply chain partners were a really big part of the role that we played in our market engagement phase for that particular project. So the market engagement phase, and that's the beauty of the information you get from your supplier surveys. You get to understand what the suppliers need to bring you this brand new thing, and you get to offer them the help either from your own resources, or if you can do that, if you've got that function in your organisation, which we're lucky we do, or you can get that support from other entities, other organisations who are there to provide that business support. And for each state in Australia, that's different, but they're all there. So does that help, Nicole?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Something to add there, Nicole, when the part where you kind of scan the market for solutions is one aspect of what is needed. The other part is when you scope what needs to be procured. So there's internally, you kind of got to look at internally as well as the future outlook. So which is a more outward focused demand gathering exercise. Is this something that is this something that is need for the future? Is this something that is going to evolve in the future as a need? So there's a part where, especially if a public procurer is involved, there's a part where you kind of look at the broader benefit to society for things like, for example, renewable technology or renewable energy, or like circular economy. There's a broader outlook exercise that you take as well to understand if this is something that is got to evolve, and we got to give that push to evolve. So scoping that, is this something that is for the public good, and is this something we need to encourage as a public procurer? There's a bit of an element which gets added additionally when a public procurer does it, which takes time. I think in the very initial phase. So yeah, as we're coming to the end of I hope that point was useful.
Thank you.
Because we're getting to the end of the webinar, I
can answer those other questions really quickly if you like, Mayuri. There's two there. If you like, in just 1 minute, if folks are willing to stick around. Or we can just send them the answers afterwards.
Shall I, for the sake of who might leave at 5 o'clock, would it be okay that I do the last to end the webinar? And if you like to stay back, I'm happy to stay for another 5-10 minutes, Tina, and we could answer those questions if people are interested, if that's okay.
Absolutely. And thank you to those who've asked for the e-learning course. We're happy to share. I'll get your contact details and we can set up a login for you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much. So if you have further questions, we're happy to stay for a bit longer, but I'll probably go through the last few slides so that we can gather your feedback about the future webinars to be done as well. So if you could see my screen, we have another upcoming webinar in somewhere in March, April. We are trying to still schedule the date. So what we had was the one on the 7th of February. The next webinar will focus on identifying skill and capability gaps in organizations in transition to circular economy. In terms of the courses, there's the course on circular procurement, which will run on the 4th and 5th of March, which is available as a public course. And for the other course on transition to a circular economy, which is part of our course hub, the dates are yet to be decided. We would love your feedback on the webinar. It'll help us improve what we have to do better next time. And if you could take a few minutes to give us feedback, we would really appreciate that. And it was great to have all of you here. And thanks for the questions. Thanks to Tina for bringing that perspective of public sector procurement for innovation with the initial project, the very first project in Australia that the City of Greater Geelong did. And thank you to everyone for attending and being part of this. If you could take a few minutes to give us feedback, we would really appreciate that. And those of you who have further questions, we could stay in for a few more minutes, to answer the questions.
Perhaps, Mayuri, if it helps with the recording, if you're going to share that There's those two questions that I'm happy to give
Yes.
some insight into. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of them, just go
We
back
share the
up.
recording with the participants.
Yeah. So I'll just.
And Tina,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't know if this is my question you might be looking at.
There was one about the MAV engaging similar need in other councils. Was that your question?
No, sorry.
No, that was from Joe. Excuse me. No, Thomas, is yours the longer one? Yeah, okay. Let me just answer Joe's first then, and I'll come back to you, Thomas. Yours was a great question, as is Joe's. So there, when we embarked on our first procurement for innovation regarding the bridges, there was a regional procurement network that we went out to. And then as we started to release more information about the exercise that we were undertaking, councils sort of came out of the woodwork to share with us information. We also conducted desktop research into what other councils might need who are looking, at bridge works in recreational spaces. And indeed, our internal engineers also had lots of information about who buys what in other councils too. So we didn't engage MAV as such to gauge those similar needs, because we ended up being able to capture that experience through other means. So that's the answer to that question. Thomas, coming back to so thank you for that, Joe. Coming back to your question, Thomas, about the incubation period for innovation, there's a real, there's a big reason as to why at the very beginning I say innovation takes time, because your question is that perfect question which our leaders do ask. Why does it take so much time? And our answer is always because innovation takes time. And in order to deliver a robust, meaningful market engagement process that both suppliers and buyers gain something from, the more time you can give it, the better the outcomes, is what our experience has been. We tried to speed it up twice. We tried to speed it up, and both times the procurement for innovation exercises ended up pushing out for 4 years. So it sounds like a lot of time, but then when you get into the throes of it, particularly that R&D, market engagement, innovation development phase, 3 years passes by incredibly quickly. And even when we've tried to speed it up and reduce the market engagement phase to, 9 months or 18 months, it's still pushed out to 3 years, because the market are busy doing all the things they do, and the more time we can give them to develop their innovation, the better. What I would say in addition to that is that we don't stop buying recreational bridges the way we currently buy recreational bridges that whole time. We continue to buy recreational bridges the way we buy recreational bridges, which are purchased and made from materials that deteriorate more quickly. We just continue to buy those. So it's business as usual until we have the alternative that the market is able to supply us with. So it's business as usual until that innovation comes to market. So yeah, we've tried, but we weren't successful in speeding it up. But I love your idea about if you can get the market, to speed it up, and trying to get leadership to speed things up. I think that's fantastic.
Any more questions about the engagement of MAV? Tina, would you like to answer that?
Say that again.
There was a question about whether MAV was engaged. Did you guys engage MAV to gauge similar needs in other councils?
That was the answer I started with, Mayuri, which is the one about the regional procurement forum, the network. We went to them and talked to them. Indeed, our engineers have lots of experience with other engineers, because they're linked to the Institute for Public Works and Engineering Australasia and all sorts of networks. So they had their own networks that they were relating to. And as we started to filter out information about our procurement for innovation exercise, other councils started to come forward and started to watch what we were doing and kept up with with us to learn more about what we were doing over time. So that became a really useful source for us. So no, we didn't go directly to MAV because we ended up sourcing information from other networks that we had at that particular point in time. But it's a great idea. I think it's a terrific idea.
Beautiful. We've got basically, we pretty much answered a lot of it. Does anybody else have any questions? We would really appreciate your feedback. If you can stick around for 1 minute to answer the feedback questions.
Thomas, if there's any other questions that you have in relation to that timing issue, it's one of the biggest sticklers we have and one of the biggest hurdles folks have to get over when they're trying to get approval. But it's interesting, once you get through the first process, leadership certainly like the look of the outcomes that get generated and the ribbon cutting opportunities and all of that kind of thing. And so it hasn't been an issue for us to talk about using the methodology a second and a third time. So sometimes that's worth it too.
Maybe you can take it offline. I've heard about your pedestrian bridge prior, and I was interested in that practical example. It's a really good one, but yeah, obviously a lot of political goodwill involved too.
Well, it's staff time. It's all staff time, actually, and in effect, certainly our procurement practitioners loved it. You know, they've actually written it into our procurement policy now. So using procurement for innovation as a methodology is now written into our ongoing procurement policy because they loved the process that we used. They loved the good and indeed best practice that gets used in the methodology, and found that it was a really useful way for us to be able to embed good procurement practices in our organisation. So that became really valuable to us as an organisation too, to continue to spend time on doing it.